My name is Ava Tab. I'm presenting a workshop today on self-management, 4 ways to improve your effectiveness. If you recall in last class, Molly presented a workshop on time management, and I think these topics are so relative. Time management versus self-management, these areas work so well together. You can manage your time, but having to manage yourself makes it even more effective. So within this workshop, I will discuss 4 ways to improve your effectiveness. My audience, you might consider, are adult learners. So you all are among my target audience for this workshop. The next slide includes my contents in this presentation and the workshop. I will present following a video on time management also versus self-management. I'll discuss the learning objectives, and as you probably know, I conducted a survey on self-management probably about 4 weeks ago, and I want to revisit that survey in terms of discussing at least 3 or 4 of the pertinent questions. I have planned for an interactive exercise, and thereafter, I will discuss briefly my references and answer any questions that persons might have. Now, one thing I'd like to say also, since this workshop is being recorded, I did need to adjust all of the text on this presentation to ensure that the video is visible. So we do want to keep that in mind. Here I will play a video where author Steve Robbins, an executive coach and communication specialist, he has written books on personal development. But I included this video because here he differentiates between self-management and time management. Oftentimes we associate self-management as being time management, but there are two different areas. He, in this short video, will talk about and explain self-management, but he'll also briefly discuss how it works so well with time management. Just more about Robbins. He has written articles published in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal on self-management, time management, personal achievements, and goal setting.
We talk about time management, but you can't manage time. The only thing you can manage is yourself. I was at a conference once and found myself in a hallway talking to a billionaire, somebody whose name I had seen on the cover of magazines and things. And I realized, starting from this moment, we're here together, and starting from this moment, we're going to both walk off and do stuff. The stuff that that person's going to do is going to build a multi-billion-dollar business, and the stuff that I'm going to do is maybe make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and if I'm lucky, I might make $100 today. And I suddenly realized that he had no more time than I did. It's just he used that time differently. So rather than thinking about time management, thinking about self-management, how is it that you can use your day, how is it that I can use my day to get the most bang for our moment that we have? So if I put together a to-do list that has 100 items on it for today, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go through my inbox and consider each email message and so on and so forth, I might get through 200 email messages. And then there may be a 201st in my box, but whatever. However, if I scan through my email before I start and discover there's one, though 201st, which is absolutely critical to moving my project forward, I can handle that one email and possibly even ignore the other 200 and end up making more progress than if I had tried to do every single email. Because the secret to time management and to organizing your day isn't do as much as possible, it's make as much progress as possible. And to do that, you want to start by looking over what it is that you could do and selecting only the things that will give you the most actual forward movement and the most results for your time spent. Do those first. Then, if you feel like it, do all of the rest of it. But you can't manage time. All you can manage is your decisions about how you're going to spend your day and what you're going to do.
Now that we have a clear understanding of self-management and how it differs with time management, in the next slide I'll discuss the objectives for this workshop. The first learning objective, learners will be able to construct what is similar to a SWOT analysis. Here I'm calling it a self-analysis to analyze your abilities, competencies, weaknesses, skills, and interests. So again, very similar to a SWOT analysis you may have performed for work. Secondly, learners will be able to develop an action plan for setting a distal goal and also a proximal goal. Thirdly, learners will be able to discriminate or distinguish between positive and negative self talk. And lastly, here, learners will be able to identify ways to self monitor their performance in the important areas of their lives. As I mentioned, I conducted a 10-question survey using SurveyMonkey, and I sent this survey to students enrolled in this course and in another course that I take, Design and Analysis 1. So altogether, it was sent to maybe 40 persons. Now, I had 31 participants to complete the survey, and if you were one of those people, I do want to thank you now for completing the survey. It was sent around Thanksgiving, so I know that was not probably the most convenient time, but I do appreciate those persons that completed the survey. Now, here I want to discuss in this slide and also the probably the next 3 slides, just a few of the 10 questions that I included. The first question, or statement rather, I feel overwhelmed by too many tasks and also responsibilities juggling priorities. Now, other results here are 4%. Again, this is based on 31 participants. 4% said never, 35, which is pretty significant, said sometimes, and then equivalent to the 35% of sometimes, we also have 35% says this oftentimes is the case for me. And then 26% said rarely, and then also to follow 0% said always. So in terms of feeling overwhelmed with too many tasks and responsibilities, the most significant sometimes are often. So again, in creating this workshop and then this presentation, based on the results from the survey, I wanted to find out what are some ways that can actually help people to manage themselves to make sure that they are more effective in accomplishing their goals. In continuing with the results of the survey on self-management, here upon this slide, I wanted to discuss 3 particular questions. The second question, the fourth, and the eighth. The second question, or statement rather, says that I am very busy and impatient. Now, we're considering again that 31 persons participated in this survey. The results are as indicated. 0 persons said always, 5 people said often, 15 of the 31 participants said sometimes, 7 rarely, and 3 persons said never. And I should note, you may be able to see here from the PowerPoint, but question 2 is of the red block. Question 4, which is the second one, is of the orange. And then also question 8, which is our third question of the 3 that we have here, is indicated in yellow. So back to question 2, or statement, I am very busy and impatient. So of the 5 areas to choose from, always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never, we had 15 of the 31 participants to say sometimes. Again, sometimes I'm very busy, maybe not quite overwhelmed, but in the busyness, I'm a bit impatient. So that's something to consider. Question 4. Stress robs me of time and energy. Again, this is indicated in the orange color. 1 of the 31 participants said always, 11 said often, 8 said sometimes, 1 said rarely, and then 7 said never. And I should note that some persons did not complete all of the 10 questions or statements. They did not provide a response. So we do need to take that into consideration. So of this question or statement 4, 11 participants said oftentimes stress robs me of time and energy, and 8 persons of the majority said stress again robs me of time and energy. So this happens more times often than not. So again, these are 2 of the 3 questions that we need to visit based on the 4 points that we'll discuss here moving forward. Now, the last question of the 3 that appear on this slide in the survey dealt with I am sleep deprived and do not feel rested in the morning. Again, we're going with the yellow. So of the 31 participants, we have 5 said always, 3 said often, 13 of the 31 participants said sometimes, which is huge. 7 said rarely, and 3 said never. So sometimes, with 31 persons choosing this, I am sleep deprived. That means I'm not getting enough rest. I do not feel rested in the morning. So that means that I know for myself, sometimes I feel as if I'm in a rat race with the routine of work, school, maybe a little sleep, and then I'm doing it all over again. So we have to find ways to manage our time, which is very important. But not only that, how do we manage ourselves to be more effectiveness in our daily tasks? Okay, moving on to the next slide. Now, this dealt with the questionnaire statement 10 of this survey on self management. I wanted to do something different here. Oftentimes, within a survey or a questionnaire, it's multiple choice, similar to a Likert scale. But of the questions or statements in this survey, I wanted persons to be able to provide feedback. So, the last item of the 10 questions or statements allow persons to, we can consider it to be an essay or short answer question or statement. So, what it says here, what steps in self management do you take to improve yourself in the important areas of your life? The first question, I get easily overwhelmed and stressed out when I have a lot of things to do in my hand. So I always make a to do list to finish important things in advance. This is good. I would not be surprised that all of us make to do lists. But as Arthur Robbins mentioned, and something we have to keep in mind, it's one thing to make a to do list, but we have to prioritize that to-do list. And we can't get frustrated or overwhelmed when we create a to-do list and don't accomplish or are able to check off those things on the to-do list. But what do we need to do in order to accomplish and finish the to-do list? Now, what can we put off without procrastinating? Okay, one of the second responses that I have listed here, I keep a running list of the things that I enjoy so that when work gets to be a bit much, I can reflect on what I enjoy and I can plan to do what I enjoy. This is good. Sounds like this person includes a little me time, which is very important. Okay, next, I am changing the way I eat and exercise for the better. Good in terms of self management. I always regularly attend church. I pray and expect God to answer, perhaps in ways that I do not want, but He answers. This is true. All of the above help me to better cope with stress. This is good. We have to appreciate that this person has found an avenue or something that works well for them to help them manage stress. Doesn't mean that they're not stressed out, but they've learned how to manage their stress, that they're able to accomplish things. So maybe it's that this person mentions exercise. So maybe the person practices yoga, goes to a fitness class to de-stress. And then lastly, here, working out, again, relative to exercise, breathing exercise, taking quiet time for myself, and paying more attention to what I eat. These are all great strategies and ways to improve your self management. Okay, moving on here, we want to get right into the gist of this workshop in terms of what are the 4 ways to improve your effectiveness. The first I'll discuss is a self assessment. You may recall in the objectives, I talked about this being similar to a SWOT analysis on yourself, however. The second is goal setting and developing an action plan. One thing to set a goal, but you have to develop steps or strategies, ultimately a plan to accomplish the goal. And then next, constructive thought patterns. What are you thinking? And then lastly, self-monitoring. The first of the 4 steps of improvement, effectiveness on self management, is self assessment. Here you want to perform an evaluation of your strengths, your weaknesses, your competencies, also your values and interests. Now, oftentimes we know our strengths, but we are reluctant to discuss our weaknesses. But it's very important, as we have learned in this class and also in some other adult learning classes that you may have taken, knowing your weaknesses will help you in terms of what area you should focus on, especially areas of improvement. You want to perform, as indicated in this slide, a personal inventory and also a reality check. We don't want to lie to ourselves. We want to be realistic in terms of what am I good at? What am I not good at? What can I do to improve those areas of weakness? And then lastly of this slide, we want to obtain candid and honest feedback. So you may want to talk to some of your coworkers, some family members that you can trust in terms of providing honest feedback about you. Perhaps you perform this sort of personal identity or inventory on yourself, and you talk to your coworker or your family member, and you're wanting to ask them, okay, what are your thoughts in terms of my strengths, in terms of my weakness? What are some areas that you think I could work on for improvement? It could be your personality, it could be your procrastination, okay? But again, you're wanting to consider, what are my abilities? What are my competencies? The second of the fourth deals with goal setting and action planning. Now, here we're wanting to set a goal. All persons are familiar with setting goals, but it's very important that you consider an action plan to execute the goal. Here we have, in terms of setting goals, proximal, which is similar to a short term goal. It says here to provide learners with the ability to measure or monitor progress toward their goals. And then there's a second goal setting called distal, similar to long term goal setting. Whether it's short term within about 3 to 6 months or long term, a year or plus, you want to develop an action plan. The items to follow: establishing an action plan. How will the action plan be achieved? What steps are necessary to accomplish this goal? I'll give you an example. We could have a doctoral student that has a goal to be published in 2 journals within a year. Perhaps it's a second year doctoral student in adult education. Now, that is the goal within a year's time to be published in 2 different journals. However, it's one thing to have that goal to be published, but what steps are necessary in order to meet that goal? So the action plan could consist, and you may think about this also, the student, the adult learning doctoral student, would need to begin researching the topic or the area of focus that they intend to write about. Also, the doctoral student could develop in the action plan points of contacting their professors that they have formed relationships with and saying, once I begin the writing process, I would like to meet with you that you read or review the draft. These are steps for an action plan to make this goal of publishing, being published within the journal, happen. So it's one thing, again, to set the goal, but we have to consider that action plan. And then another step that the doctoral student may consider is that I set aside maybe 1 to 2 hours daily, with the exception of the weekend, to read, to write, to edit, and so forth. Okay, now you should be having an idea of goal setting and also action plan and self assessment. I'm going to move on to the next one. This slide was intended for an interactive exercise, but it doesn't work out so since this is being recorded. But the interactive exercise, I encourage you to do it at your own time. So as you may be watching this, you can do it, or even at another time. The idea was that persons would spend about 3 to 5 minutes generating a goal, whether it be proximal or distal setting, and then develop a 2 step action plan. So again, you may do this in your own time. You think of a short term or a long term goal. It could be financial, it could be academic in terms of graduating. And you want to think, what strategies, what are 2 steps I can develop in order to make sure that my goal is accomplished? And then we would have had a brief discussion. But I'll move on to our third point of the 4. Now, of this step, constructive thought pattern, we want to begin thinking about what you're thinking about. It may sound strange, but it's important to think about what you're thinking. Not only think about it, but what are you saying to yourself internally? Internal dialogue. There was a recent meta analysis that dealt with 60 different studies, and the researchers studied athletes' psychological outlook in terms of what are they thinking before a track meet? What are they thinking before a football game? Developing a positive self thought pattern helps in terms of executing positive things. Mental conception. 2 contrasting patterns of thinking are thinking opportunity and also obstacle thinking. You may have heard of these terms before, but opportunity thinking is positive thinking. There's opportunity as a possibility. Obstacle thinking is just the opposite. Maybe it includes fear, reluctancy, intimidation. I can't, gosh, I can't pass this class. It's too difficult. But instead of obstacle thinking, opportunity. Okay, this proves to be a difficult course. However, maybe I contact a tutor. Perhaps I befriend somebody in the class that's doing well and I ask them, well, what works for you? What strategies would you recommend for me since this proves to be very difficult? Okay, so again, self talk and mental conception. Think about what you're thinking about. And lastly, of the 4 points, self monitoring. Self monitoring addresses cognitive and metacognitive processes. Um, in adult learning, it's largely dealt with self directed learning. You probably are familiar with that. But in terms of self directed learning, we have to monitor our progress. Here, the second point, learners take responsibility for learning their tasks and goals. So, as was mentioned previously, maybe you do make a to do list, but monitor how well you're accomplishing that to do list. How well are you progressing and meeting the goal of having articles published in a journal? If you're not adhering to your 1 to 2 hours a day, with the exception of the weekend where you're writing research, what's happening? What's a distraction of your time? So monitoring your progress. Okay, and here, lastly, as I approach the end of this workshop, I have listed several references that I use. And then, if this was presented in class, I would offer that you ask any questions, or I also offer any comments that you have. Because this is recorded, if you do have questions or you have comments, I do welcome them. You're welcome to email me, amtabb@gmail.com. Thank you for your time.